Okay, there were quite a few people absent today, so I'm going to go through what I went through in class for everyone else today. But obviously it's not as good as being in class, so I feel people are getting a bit stressed, and I hope that you do make it into classes because it's really important at this point. Okay, here we go. This is talking about what's on your first year exam and how to get revising for it. So just to remind you of the key information, the English language exam will be on Tuesday the 7th of June. It starts at 2 o'clock, but that is literally when you have to be ready to put pen to paper. So good practice, preparation for actual A-levels, get there in plenty of time, and then you'll be called in, you'll be sat in the hut and get ready, start at 2. It's the exam hut. I know some of you have been asking me where it is. Your tutor probably might take you over for a little look, show you where it is beforehand. This paper is long, but this is how long it will be in the real exam. It is 2 hours and 30 minutes. That is till 3:30. Okay, so just bear that in mind. You'll need to get a lift or a bus or something a bit later than usual. Most exam boards say black pen, think, rather than blue, so it's a good idea to have black pens and a see-through pencil case. You can bring in water to drink, but nothing noisy. Okay, so what is on your paper, and in the real exam what's on the paper? There's 2 sections. Section A is called diversity and change. We're only doing diversity. You have a choice of 2, answer either question 1 or question 2 on section A. But in section B, there are no options. You answer both question 3 and question 4. So section A is one that's very familiar to something you have prepared for at school. It's an essay question. It's a 45-minute essay question, and it's worth 30 marks. You should be aiming to write more than 3 sides in 45 minutes. Okay, so and where does that come from? That comes from having a lot of knowledge and a lot of understanding. So that's the point of revising. So you've got lots of stuff to write about in your essay. And just to remind you of some techniques, that you should identify the key words in the question statement, underline them, and think carefully about what they imply. And also start thinking for the case studies you're going to use, the examples of your own that help you evaluate the validity of the different views. It will always be a question saying, here's a statement, how far do you agree? And in section B, the question 3 will be 2 opinion articles or newspaper articles or blogs about a language issue. You have 45 minutes, well, you've got more than 45 minutes, sorry. You've got an hour to do this one, but the recommendation is you spend 15 minutes preparing the data. That is using the 3 highlighter method, and then 45 minutes writing your answer. This is worth more than the essay. This is worth 40 marks. And you have to do some language analysis here. You're talking about how the texts construct and convey their views. So this is one where you talk about how is the language topic represented? How does the writer represent themselves and other people? And how are you positioned as a reader? Who is the ideal reader? It's those 3. And you are meant to focus on the ways in which texts are part of a discourse or habitual way of seeing language. So you can talk about, if it's a gender argument, you can talk about it's got a difference discourse or a dominance discourse. If it's about social class, you can talk about it clearly identifies personal identity as being important, or you could say it's very prescriptive. Those are some of the discourses. And then after that, you write your own opinion article, 45 minutes to do that. This is worth 30 marks. And you are meant to write your own opinion article about the ideas that were in the question 3 texts. You need to show knowledge of linguistic ideas and research, and you need to critique the ideas in the question 3 texts. So it's like an essay, but it needs to have knowledge and understanding of linguistic issues in it. Okay, so it's not just opinion in that I don't agree with this. You have to say this is a bad idea about language, and there is research and there are studies that show this is a bad idea about language. So get ready to revise, okay? This is my top advice to you. First thing, before you can revise, you need to have good stuff to revise from. So you need to sort out your notes and class handouts. You should by this point have at least one ring binder folder for each A-level subject. Ideally, you should have a different one for different topics or exam papers. And within that, you should be able to divide your notes up. That will help you feel like you've got control, like things are in order, you know what goes where. Really good way to start revising. So just to help you in English language, remember or decide what goes where, paper 1, which you are not being examined on, is all the language analysis framework that we learnt in the beginning in the first year. All the stuff about lexis, semantics, grammar, pragmatics, discourse, stuff about spoken and written mode, and that's when we have 2 texts to analyse the meanings and representations in them. Okay, we will be doing that in the real exam, but for now we're only doing paper 2. So paper 1, put it in one folder. Paper 2, put it in another folder. This is language and social group. So things about class and region. So that is things about accent and dialect. Age, in particular teenagers and how teenagers speak. Gender, all the studies about how gender affects language. And occupation, the things we did at the end about how occupation can affect language. Okay, so now you've got your notes all sorted out, you are ready to revise. And what I would suggest here is when you've been going through your notes, you may have noticed some of them are messy, some of them are unclear. So rewrite those notes, make them clear, add bits to help you if you don't understand what words were. Yeah, use your textbook, use Teams, use Moodle. If you can't remember what we studied or what was happened, if you're really stuck, you can ask me. I'm willing and happy to answer a question. And once you've got your file all beautiful, compare it with another student's, because they will have notes on something you've missed, you will have notes on something they've missed, and you can talk across and say, oh, do you think this is this? Do you think that is this? Like I say, use your textbook and use Teams and Moodle to fill in any gaps that you've identified. And once you've got all that, then you can start making revision notes, however you like to do that. Mind maps, index cards. What you're aiming to do is condense the knowledge down. You still have all that knowledge, but you condense it down so that you see one thing, for example, trudgill, and you go, yes, trudgill, Norwich study, class, convergence, yeah? But you've got it down to one word, and that springs off everything in your brain. So however you do that to help yourself, colours, underlining, different fonts, post-its, whatever it takes to get that knowledge in your brain. So there's 2 things, there's knowledge and there's understanding. Knowledge comes first, okay? You've got to have a nice solid base of knowledge before you can do the understanding-y sort of tasks. So what is that big solid base of knowledge? The studies, okay? So most of our studies have a named researcher or 2. So you need to remember their surname. You don't need to remember anyone's first name. It does help if you spell it correctly. And what you really want to have is their key findings. Okay, don't know the entire study. Just remember what is the most important thing about this study. Yep. Labov found evidence for upward convergence when he did his department store study. When he did his Martha's Vineyard study, he found evidence of downward convergence. Trudgill found evidence of upward convergence. Yeah, so you can just, that is literally, from the whole study, this is the one thing they found. It's even better if you have an example and a language level. So Labov found evidence of upward convergence by looking for the use of the postvocalic R in the answer to the question, which was 4th floor. Yeah, that is top mark stuff if you get all that in. Not everything is a researcher. There are some other some case studies. So I mentioned there George Osborne. Yeah, that evidence of George Osborne downward converging when he was talking to the factory workers, that is still good evidence. That's not a named study. Similarly, the video we watched about multicultural London English. Yep, so it's not always studies. Sometimes it's just what we call a case study, a good example that we've looked at. And the other kind of knowledge you need is to be able to use linguistic concepts and terminology. So there I've just mentioned upward and downward convergence. Okay. But if you think about gender lect, a lot of the time we're talking about discourse features like interruptions and tag questions. Those are those things. Okay, so that's knowledge, great. And you will get marks, quite a lot of marks for knowledge, but the exam is also testing understanding. And that comes out in answers to questions. So how do you practice, revise, make better your understanding? You have to get involved in debating. And every topic will have a two-way answer or a two-way debate. So look at past essay questions, look for the arguments and evidence for and against the statement in the question, and decide how far you do or don't agree. That's evaluation, and that's important. And then for section B, you also need to think about attitudes. These are attitudes in the wider society to language use. And you have lots of examples of newspaper articles on language topics. So for example, teenage slang. We've got articles saying we should ban teenage slang in schools. We've got articles saying teenagers should be allowed to use their slang. Okay, that's different attitudes to teenage slang. Some people think it's terrible, some people think it's okay. So that's identifying their attitude to the language topic under discussion. You could also think about which language discourse it sounds like. So people who say you shouldn't use teenage slang are prescriptivists. And people who say it's fine could be called descriptivists. And then think about how you could disagree with their views using language study evidence, because you then also have to engage with the debate in your own opinion article. So the revision tasks that happened in class today was that students used their textbook. There's a checkbox exercise on page 187 to 188 in which you tick how well you feel you know about certain topics. And then you can identify your weak areas and revise those first. So tempting to revise what you like and what you're already confident on. You've got to revise what you're weakest on first. You may also want to buy another textbook. Some people in class said, oh, this one's better, and it is, I'm afraid, for the year one topics. I didn't want to ask you to buy 2 textbooks. It seems annoying, but perhaps I should. So if you do want to have a look at that other textbook, or there is a copy or 2 in the study centre. So you don't have to buy one, you could take one out of the library. Yes, it is better on the first year topics than the one you have now. Just believe me, that one is better for the second year. And then I gave the class some essay questions to help them revise. So use these questions to revise. Find examples, evidence, studies, and think about the key concepts that you would use to answer each of those questions. And you can see how they have debate things. The most important, defines, are more attractive. The only standard, always be. An important part, more powerful, yeah? So they're always putting it very strongly, so there is always an argument for and against. And you need to think of the evidence and the arguments for and against, and don't sit on the fence at the end. Say you mostly agree, you partly agree, you mostly disagree. You've got to come to some sort of scale of judgment. Okay, so that's what we did today. Please try and be in the rest of our classes, because that means basically I'm teaching the class twice. Okay, bye. Hi.